After the wedding, my son-in-law showed up at my door with a notary. "We just sold this house. You're moving into a home for the elderly." I smiled and said, "Perfect. Let's head to the police station first. They're very interested in what I sent them about you." Just 2 days after my daughter's wedding, a day I'd spent thousands making perfect, my new son-in-law walked into my home with a chilling declaration. "We just sold this house. You're moving to a retirement home." The arrogance in his eyes promised a swift victory, but he had no idea he'd just picked a fight with the wrong old man. The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Just 2 days ago, the wedding cake was still sweet on my tongue. Now it turned bitter. "Philip, that's my home," I managed, my voice steady, though my hands clenched the table's edge. "I built it with my own hands 20 years ago." My daughter Lillian shifted uncomfortably between us, her new wedding ring glinting in the dim restaurant light. The intimate booth suddenly felt suffocating, other diners laughing, oblivious to the bomb that had just exploded in ours. He just smiled, that smug, unwavering smile. "But you're just one person in such a large house. It's not practical, and at your age, wouldn't you prefer something more manageable?" 68 wasn't ancient, but he spoke like I had one foot in the grave. My champagne flute trembled. "We take such good care of it," he continued, reaching across for Lillian's hand. "Think about it. Your grandchildren playing in those rooms someday." Lillian's eyes darted between us, pleading, "Dad, Philip, please don't fight. It's supposed to be a happy day." Happy? I just written a $15,000 check for that wedding reception. The flowers from the ceremony still sat wilting on our table. I straightened in my seat. "Philip, at my age, I'm still strong enough to make decisions about my own property. The answer is no. You can stay for a few days while you find your own place." His confident expression flickered. Just for a moment, something cold passed behind his eyes before the charming mask snapped back on. "Of course, Preston, I understand completely." But his tone had sharpened. "It's just that rental prices these days, and with Lillian's teaching salary, we'll manage, honey." Lillian squeezed his hand, but I caught the worry in her voice. Philip's jaw tightened. What's the point of holding on to such a valuable asset when it could benefit all of us? An asset, not my home. Not where I'd carried my wife over the threshold, where Lillian took her first steps, where Margaret spent her final days. An asset. The background jazz felt mocking now. I pushed back from the table, my napkin falling to the floor. The other diners blurred as blood rushed to my ears. "Preston, wait." Lillian half rose, but I was already standing, fishing 2 20s from my wallet. They hit the table with more force than necessary. "Take care of the check," I managed. "I need some air." Philip's voice followed me. "We'll talk about this later, Preston, when you've had time to think it through properly." The restaurant's warmth pressed against my back, each step carrying me away from my daughter's pleading eyes and my son-in-law's calculating smile. Outside, the March air bit at my face. My hands shook, not just from the cold. The drive home was silent, Lillian's worried glances burning into my conscience through the rearview mirror. Inside, I loosened my tie and poured 3 fingers of whiskey. My study welcomed me with familiar shadows, my worn leather chair, Margaret's photos smiling from the desk. The audacity of it all still stole my breath. $15,000. I'd written that check without a second thought, watching Lillian's face light up as she described her dream wedding. Now, her husband wanted the house too. I scrolled through wedding photos from 2 days ago. Philip cutting cake, his hand over Lillian's on the knife. Philip dancing with my daughter, spinning her until she laughed. Philip shaking my hand, calling me Dad, for the first time. Had he been planning this even then? The whiskey burned, but not as much as the memory of Philip's smile when I'd refused. Like he'd expected resistance. Like this was all part of some larger twisted game. My fingers found Margaret's journal, the one she gave me when I retired. "For all those ideas rattling around in your head," she'd said. I wrote the date carefully. March 17, 2025. Philip Green demanded house ownership during wedding celebration dinner. Claims practical concerns. Mentions my age repeatedly. Lillian uncomfortable but supportive of husband. What kind of man does that? 2 days after a wedding I paid for, he wants my home? Not asking to buy it, not suggesting we sell and split proceeds. He wanted it handed over, like I was some doddering old fool ready for the nursing home. I opened my laptop. Bank statements, property records, insurance documents, numbers representing a lifetime of careful planning. My house was worth $400,000, maybe more in today's market. My pension and savings would last decades. Philip knew all this somehow. His questions during the engagement hadn't seemed invasive then, just a future son-in-law showing interest in family matters. Now they felt like reconnaissance. What's your property tax situation like, Preston? This neighborhood must have great appreciation rates. Have you considered what you'll do with all this space eventually? I'd answered honestly, proud of my financial stability. Proud to show Lillian's fiancé that she came from a secure family. Margaret's photo caught the lamplight, her eyes seeming to watch me. "Trust but verify," she used to say. Asterisk people show you who they are if you pay attention. Asterisk I'd been too happy about Lillian's engagement, too grateful she'd found someone after her divorce 3 years ago, too relieved she seemed settled and content, to pay proper attention. The journal lay open. I picked up the pen again. Asterisk Philip Green, 38 years old, business consultant. Claims to help small companies improve efficiency. Works from home, travels occasionally for clients. Never mention specific companies or show detailed business knowledge during conversations. Asterisk the more I wrote, the more questions emerged. What exactly did Philip do for work? I'd never seen him in a proper office, never heard him take business calls around the house. His income seemed adequate but not excessive. Yet he proposed with a 2-carat ring that must have cost $20,000. Something felt wrong about Philip Green. Very wrong. Tomorrow I call Edward Lloyd, my lawyer. 2 days later, the grocery bags felt heavier than usual as I pulled into my driveway. 2 days of restless sleep since that restaurant confrontation had left me drained. Every shadow seemed to hide new threats to my peace of mind. Cecil Brown, my neighbor, straightened from his flower bed as I stepped out of the car, his weathered face serious. "Preston," he said, crossing from his yard to mine with quick steps. "I need to tell you something important." I set the groceries on my car's hood. Cecil's former police instincts were evident in his tone. "What's going on?" "Yesterday afternoon, Philip brought someone to your house. Business type in a suit, carrying a briefcase and some kind of measuring device." My blood went cold. What were they doing exactly? Walking around the property, measuring things, taking photos. The guy was writing everything down. Looked like a professional assessment to me. Real thorough job. The groceries suddenly felt insignificant. Philip had keys. He'd let them inside. Spent a lot of time in your backyard. Measured the fence line. Took pictures of the foundation. My hands clenched into fists. Figured you knew about it. Otherwise, I would have called sooner. "Thank you, Cecil. This is very important information." I grabbed the grocery bags with shaking hands. Very important indeed. Inside, I dropped the bags on the kitchen counter and went straight to my study. The computer took forever to boot up, each second stretching like an hour while my mind raced through possibilities. Browser history. If Philip had used my computer, there'd be traces. The search history loaded, and my worst fears materialized on the screen. Wednesday afternoon, while I'd been at the hardware store, someone had conducted extensive research. Asterisk property appraisers, Chicago suburbs, real estate evaluation services, quick house sale companies, cash buyers, residential properties. Asterisk each search term hit like a physical blow. I scrolled down, finding more. Asterisk legal requirements, property transfer, Illinois. Power of attorney, real estate transactions. Elderly homeowner assistance programs. Asterisk my hands trembled as I clicked through the visited websites. Professional appraisal services. Companies that promise quick sales for cash. Legal firms specializing in property transfers for senior citizens. Philip hadn't just brought an appraiser to my house. He'd researched the entire process of taking it from me. The chair creaked as I leaned back, processing the magnitude of his deception. This wasn't a spontaneous request made over dinner wine. This was a calculated plan, probably months in the making. I thought about the engagement period, Philip's careful questions about my finances, his interest in my daily routines. Had he been evaluating me like a target from the beginning? My phone buzzed. A text message from Lillian. Asterisk Dad, are you feeling better? Philip says you seemed upset at dinner. Maybe we can all talk tonight. Asterisk talk? Philip wanted to talk again, probably to present his reasonable proposal, backed by professional appraisals and legal research. I stared at the screen, the evidence clear as daylight. With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone and dialed Edward Lloyd's number. This was bigger than just wanting my house. This was systematic fraud, and I needed professional help immediately. Edward Lloyd's office. This is Sandra. My hand shook as I gripped the phone tighter. Sandra, it's Preston Weaver. I need to speak with Edward immediately. It's urgent. He's with a client, Mr. Weaver. Can I have him call you back? Tell him it's about fraud. Real estate fraud. The words felt foreign in my mouth. Tell him my son-in-law, Philip Green, is trying to steal my house. A pause. I'll get him right away, sir. The wait stretched endlessly. I paced my study, the browser history still glowing on the computer screen like evidence of a crime already committed. Preston, Edward's voice carried immediate concern. Sandra said something about fraud involving your son-in-law. Philip Green. I forced the name through gritted teeth. He's planning to take my house, Edward. I have proof he's been researching how to do it legally. The silence on Edward's end lasted too long. Philip Green, you said? Yes, he married my daughter 2 days ago, and now he's... Preston, I need you to sit down. Give me a moment to check something in my files. I heard keyboard clicking, papers rustling, the familiar sounds of Edward's methodical approach to legal problems, but his tone suggested this wasn't routine. Preston, I have 3 active cases involving Philip Green. Each word hit like ice water. He specializes in real estate fraud targeting elderly homeowners. The room tilted around me. Are you saying he's done this before? His pattern is consistent. Marry into families, gain trust, then use forged documents to claim property ownership. Edward's voice had gone completely professional, like he was reading from case files. The victims are always men in their 60s or 70s, always recently widowed, always with adult children who are financially struggling. My free hand found the desk sketch for support. But he just married my daughter. That's exactly his timeline, Preston. He works fast before victims can react or seek legal advice. Papers rustled again. How much do you know about his background? Nothing concrete. He claimed to be a business consultant, worked from home. The admission felt pathetic. We were so happy Lillian found someone after her divorce. Preston, you're in immediate danger. Edward's urgency cut through my shock. Don't sign anything. Don't give him access to your financial documents. Don't let him handle any legal matters for you. What should I do about Lillian? She doesn't know what kind of man she married. First, we gather evidence. Then we protect your assets. Edward's tone broke no argument. Your daughter's heart can heal, but your life savings can't be recovered if they're stolen. I stared at the computer screen at the evidence of Philip's research. He brought a property appraiser to my house yesterday. Used my computer to research the legal process. That's his standard procedure. Professional appraisal, forged transfer documents, corrupt notary to validate the signatures. Edward spoke like he was reading from a playbook. Tell me exactly what you've observed. I described everything. The restaurant demand, the appraiser visit, the browser history, Philip's questions during the engagement period. Classic pattern, Edward confirmed. Preston, I'm clearing my schedule. Can you come to my office first thing tomorrow morning? Bring every document related to your property. Deed, will, insurance policies, bank statements. Should I call the police? Not yet. We need ironclad evidence first. Edward's experience showed in every word. Philip is sophisticated. He's beaten fraud charges before by claiming the victims willingly transferred property, and later developed memory problems. Memory problems? The implication stung, but I understood the strategy. One more thing, Preston. Edward's voice carried a warning. Be very careful around him until we meet. If he suspects you know his true nature, he might accelerate his timeline. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the darkened window. My son-in-law wasn't just greedy. He was a professional predator who'd chosen me as his next victim. But I hadn't survived 40 years in engineering by backing down from problems. Tomorrow, Edward and I would begin building the case that would destroy Philip Green's criminal career. As I reached for my safe combination, I heard Philip's laughter from the kitchen. And for the first time since the restaurant, I smiled. Let him laugh while he could. The drive home from Edward's office felt longer than usual. His warnings replaying in my mind like a broken record. Professional criminal, systematic fraud, multiple victims. The words had transformed my son-in-law from an annoying opportunist into something far more dangerous. Philip's car still sat in my driveway when I pulled in. Through the kitchen window, I could see him and Lillian sharing dinner. Their conversation animated and comfortable. The ordinary domestic scene felt like a grotesque performance. Now that I knew the truth, I entered through the front door, calling out casual greetings. Philip's voice carried. From the kitchen, warm and friendly, asking about my errands. The same voice that had demanded my house 3 days ago. In my study, I locked the door and went straight to the wall safe, hidden behind Margaret's portrait. The combination 51728, our wedding anniversary, had protected our most important documents for 20 years. Inside lay the foundation of my life's work. The property deed from 1985, my updated will from 2023, insurance policies, investment statements, documents Philip needed to steal my legacy. I spread everything across my desk, studying each paper with an engineer's precision. The house deed, stamped and notarized, worth $400,000 in today's market. My will, leaving everything to Lillian, updated after Margaret's death. Bank statements showing retirement savings that had taken decades to accumulate. Philip had access to none of this yet, but Edward's warnings echoed. Asterisk, he works fast. Asterisk, from the kitchen came the sound of dishes being cleared, normal married couple routines that masked Philip's predatory nature. How many other families had he infiltrated this way? How many other fathers had sat in their studies, realizing too late that they'd welcomed a thief into their homes? I pulled out my journal and began documenting everything with methodical precision. Each suspicious conversation during the engagement period. Every question about finances that had seemed caring but was actually reconnaissance. Asterisk, Preston, you must get tired rattling around in this big house. Have you considered what you'll do with all this space eventually? Lillian worries about you living alone. Asterisk, every comment now revealed its true purpose. Evaluation of my vulnerability, assessment of my attachment to the property, manipulation of my daughter's concern for my welfare. The safe also contained Margaret's jewelry, including her engagement ring. 2 carats, similar to what Philip had given Lillian. Where had a struggling business consultant gotten $20,000 for a ring? I photographed each document methodically, storing copies in multiple locations. If Philip somehow accessed the originals, I'd still have proof of ownership. The engineer in me understood redundancy and backup systems. My phone rang. Lillian. Dad, are you okay? You've been so quiet since the wedding dinner. Her voice carried genuine worry, the same concern Philip was undoubtedly exploiting. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. Philip thinks maybe we should all sit down and talk things through. Clear the air. Clear the air? Or present his forged documents and fake appraisals backed by legal research and professional preparation. Maybe tomorrow, I said. Let me get some rest first. After hanging up, I continued my security preparations. I changed all my banking pins, called my insurance company to add fraud alerts, scheduled a meeting with my investment advisor to discuss protective measures. 3 other families destroyed, Edward had said. 3 other fathers who trusted their daughter's choice in men, who'd believed in family unity over suspicious caution. But I wasn't them. 40 years of problem solving had taught me to analyze threats systematically, to prepare for failure modes, to build safeguards against worst-case scenarios. I locked the documents back in the safe and checked my watch. 9:30. Philip and Lillian were probably settling in for the evening, planning their future in my house with my money. Tomorrow I'd begin the real battle, but tonight I had one more call to make. The bank's fraud prevention hotline answered on the second ring. First National Security Department. This is Jennifer. This is Preston Weaver. Account number 447291. I need to report suspicious activity involving my son-in-law. As I explained the situation to Jennifer, I heard Philip's laughter from upstairs, and my smile returned. Let him enjoy his last night of feeling secure. Tomorrow, his world would start crumbling just like he'd planned for mine. 3 days of systematic research stretched ahead of me as I sat down at my computer with my first cup of coffee. Edward had given me a list of previous victims' names, and I had 48 hours before our planned meeting with law enforcement. Philip was still asleep upstairs with Lillian, giving me precious hours to work undetected. The first victim lived in Phoenix, Eleanor Martinez, 73, whose daughter had married Philip in October. By Christmas, forged documents claim she'd sold her house to a cash buyer for below market value. I found her on Facebook through her daughter's profile. Recent posts showed a cramped apartment, complaints about rising rent, photos of grandchildren she could no longer visit regularly. The contrast with her previous posts, a spacious ranch house, garden photos, family gatherings, told the story Edward's files had outlined. Philip's social media presence painted a different picture. Professional headshot, business conference photos, testimonials from satisfied clients. But cross-referencing dates revealed impossibilities. Philip claiming to be in Denver consulting while simultaneously honeymooning in Phoenix with Eleanor's daughter. Screenshot by screenshot, I documented the contradictions. Philip's LinkedIn showed 3 different business addresses in 18 months. His Facebook relationship status had been married to 4 different women in 2 years, each relationship lasting exactly the same timeline. Quick courtship, lavish wedding, immediate housing concerns. Day 2 brought phone calls Edward had arranged. Eleanor Martinez's voice shook as she described her ordeal. He was so helpful at first, she said. Worried about my safety living alone, offered to handle my finances so I wouldn't be stressed. Her words carried the weight of pure betrayal. One morning he showed up with a moving truck and eviction papers. Said the house had been sold for my own good. Robert Chin in Denver had a similar story. 6 weeks after the wedding, he had papers saying I'd signed a power of attorney. The signature looked real, but I never remembered signing anything. Each conversation revealed Philip's sophisticated operation. Professional document forgers, corrupt notaries, legal expertise that made victims doubt their own memories. The emotional devastation was consistent, often leading adult children to believe their new spouse over their elderly parent. Families torn apart by manufactured confusion. By day 3, I had compiled a comprehensive timeline. Philip's pattern was invariably identical. Target identification through dating apps or social events. Rapid courtship of financially struggling adult children. Marriage within 6 months. Immediate housing concerns. Professional appraisals, forged documents, and finally the revelation that the elderly parent had agreed to sell their home. The most damning evidence came from a deleted social media post I'd managed to capture through Google's cache system. Posted 2 days after our wedding, Philip had written another successful acquisition. This old man won't know what hit him. Retiring early property investment. The post had been deleted within hours, but I had screenshots. Philip's overconfidence had created the perfect evidence of premeditation. I organized everything into categories. Digital proof showing timeline inconsistencies and multiple identities. Testimonial evidence from previous victims. Documentary evidence of forged signatures and impossible notarizations, and financial evidence tracking fraudulent transactions. Edward called Wednesday evening to check my progress. This is exceptional work, Preston, he said after reviewing my preliminary findings. Most victims don't discover the pattern until after they've lost everything. What are our next steps? Tomorrow we meet with Detective Sarah Miller. She's been tracking Philip for 2 years, but hasn't had enough evidence for charges. Edward's satisfaction was evident. Your research might finally give us what we need. That night I double-checked every document, every screenshot, every victim statement. 3 days of intensive investigation had transformed me from confused homeowner to competent detective. The evidence was overwhelming, methodical, and would destroy Philip's criminal career. As I prepared to close my laptop, one final detail caught my attention. Philip's most recent Facebook post, uploaded just an hour ago. Asterisk exciting changes ahead. Sometimes family means making tough decisions for everyone's benefit. Asterisk the timing sent chills through me. Philip was preparing to make his move probably tomorrow, when he thought I was most vulnerable. I saved the screenshot and smiled grimly. Let him try. I was ready. After 3 intense days hunched over my computer, gathering evidence against Philip, I decided to clean the house properly. The irony wasn't lost on me. Preparing my home while planning to protect it from the man sleeping upstairs with my daughter. As I moved the coffee table to vacuum beneath it, something caught the morning light. A tiny lens, no bigger than a shirt button, nestled behind the decorative ceramic bowl Margaret had bought in Italy. My engineering mind processed the impossibility immediately. This wasn't dust or a drop screw. Someone had placed a camera in my living room. My hands trembled as I examined the device more closely. Professional grade, motion activated, with what looked like a micro SD card slot. The installation was sophisticated, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Philip had been recording me. The violation felt worse than his demand for my house. This was my sanctuary, the place where I'd grieved Margaret, where I'd made private phone calls, where I'd planned my investigation. All of it captured on digital video. I fought the urge to rip the device from its hiding place. Evidence. This could be evidence if I handled it correctly. Using the small screwdriver from my toolbox, I carefully extracted the micro SD card. My computer took forever to recognize the tiny device. Each second stretched as I imagined what recordings Philip might have made. 47 video files appeared on screen spanning 2 weeks. The earliest dated from Philip's 3rd day in my house. I clicked the first file with mounting dread. My own face filled the screen, talking on the phone with my insurance company about routine policy questions. The audio quality was crystal clear. The video surprisingly sharp for such a small device. File after file showed my daily routines. Morning coffee, evening news, phone conversations with Edward about estate planning. Philip had been cataloging my life, learning my patterns, probably searching for information he could use against me. Then I found what he'd really been recording. File 38 showed Philip himself standing in my living room while I was at the grocery store. He was on his phone speaking to someone with casual confidence. The old man is completely trusting. Philip's voice came through my computer speakers with crystal clarity. Asterisk, by the end of the month, the house will be ours. The documents are almost ready. Asterisk, I paused the recording, my heart hammering. Here was Philip's voice in his own words, admitting criminal intent. The conversation continued. Asterisk, Richard, are you sure the notary stamps will pass inspection? Asterisk, Richard, a name I didn't recognize but clearly Philip's accomplice. These elderly targets sometimes surprise you, came the reply through Philip's phone speaker. Asterisk, he's exactly like the others, proud, independent, but ultimately naive. Asterisk, Philip's laugh carried cruel satisfaction. Asterisk, he actually paid $15,000 for our wedding. Made it so easy to look legitimate. Asterisk, my vision blurred with rage. Every suspicion confirmed. Every fear validated. The recording continued. Asterisk, and the daughter. Lillian will never believe her precious daddy over her loving husband. She's the perfect cover. Asterisk, perfect cover. My daughter wasn't his wife. She was his alibi. I copied the file immediately, creating backups on multiple devices. This single recording was worth more than 3 days of detective work. Philip's own words clearly stating his criminal intentions, naming his accomplice, revealing his complete plan. Richard Fox, I learned from further recordings, was the corrupt notary who'd validated forged documents for Philip's previous victims. Phone conversations between them laid out the entire operation. Target selection, document preparation, family manipulation, property transfer. But Philip had made one crucial mistake. His arrogance had led him to discuss his crimes in detail, never suspecting that his own surveillance equipment would become evidence against him. I stared at my reflection in the computer screen, processing the magnitude of this discovery. The hidden camera had been meant to give Philip an advantage. Instead, his overconfidence had handed me irrefutable proof of his criminal conspiracy. I closed the laptop and reached for my phone. This evidence changed everything. It was time to stop investigating and start prosecuting. Detective Sarah Miller had been Edward's recommendation for cases exactly like this. As I dialed the police department, I finally felt like I was moving from defense to offense. Philip's own arrogance would destroy him. The downtown police station looked more intimidating than I'd expected. As I walked through the front doors carrying a briefcase filled with 3 weeks of evidence against my son-in-law, the hidden camera recordings from yesterday had been the final piece of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. But Detective Sarah Miller had agreed to see me immediately when I mentioned Philip Green's name. Mr. Weaver, a woman in her 40s approached, badge prominent on her jacket. I'm Detective Miller. Thank you for coming in. Her handshake was firm, professional, but I caught genuine curiosity in her expression as she led me toward an interview room. I have to admit I wasn't expecting much when you called, she said, gesturing for me to sit across from her at a metal table. Most elderly fraud victims have very little concrete evidence. I set my briefcase on the table with deliberate precision. Detective Miller, I spent 40 years as an engineer. I believe in documentation. She opened my case and began reviewing the organized folders, her eyebrows rising steadily. Social media screenshots, victim testimonies, financial records, and finally the audio recordings from Philip's hidden camera. After reviewing what you've brought me, she said after 20 minutes of careful examination, I can see that this is the most comprehensive case file I've seen in 15 years. Detective Miller turned to her computer, typing rapidly. We've been tracking Philip Green across 3 states for 8 months. He's wanted in connection with at least 12 fraud cases. 12? The numbers stunned me. How is that possible? He's very good at what he does. Her tone carried professional frustration. Victims are often too embarrassed to report, and evidence is usually insufficient for prosecution. She pulled up Philip's police file, showing me a map with red pins marking locations across Illinois, Colorado, and Arizona. Each pin represented a destroyed family. Well, I'm not embarrassed, I said firmly. And I have plenty of evidence. Detective Miller leaned forward, her manner shifting from routine intake to active strategizing. Mr. Weaver, you could be the key to finally stopping this man, but it would require your active cooperation in a sting operation. My pulse quickened. What kind of cooperation? We'd need you to act normally. Let Philip proceed with his plan while we record everything for evidence. She studied my face carefully. It means letting him think he's succeeding until we have him on tape committing the crime. The idea of pretending normal while Philip plotted against me felt surreal. You want me to let him think he's winning? Until we have irrefutable evidence of criminal intent. Your recordings are excellent, but we need him attempting the actual fraud. Detective Miller's experience showed in her methodical approach. It's the only way to guarantee conviction. What about my safety? We'll have officers positioned around your house. Response time under 30 seconds. She pulled out a small device no bigger than a car key fob. Panic button. One press brings immediate backup. I held the device, feeling its weight. After 3 weeks of gathering evidence, the prospect of finally confronting Philip directly felt both terrifying and necessary. When would this happen? Based on your recordings, Philip mentioned end of the month. That gives us 1 week to prepare. Detective Miller began organizing my evidence into official police folders. We'll need to install additional recording equipment, coordinate with the district attorney's office, and brief our tactical team. What about Lillian? My daughter doesn't know what she's married to. Detective Miller's expression softened slightly. Family situations are always the hardest part of these cases. But protecting your daughter means stopping Philip before he destroys more families. I thought about Eleanor Martinez crying over her lost home. Robert Chun hospitalized from stress. 12 families torn apart by one man's greed. Detective Miller, what do you need from me? Everything you've given me today is a perfect start. She stood, extending her hand again. Tomorrow morning my technical team will visit your house to install surveillance equipment. By tomorrow evening we'll be ready for Philip's next move. As she walked me to the station exit, I felt the weight of our plan settling on my shoulders. 24 hours to mentally prepare for the most important conversation I'd ever have with Philip. Mr. Weaver, Detective Miller said at the door. In 15 years of police work, I've never seen a victim turn the tables this completely. Philip Green has no idea what's coming. I drove home knowing that my quiet retirement had just become the final chapter of a criminal's career. The house felt different as I walked through the front door, knowing that within 24 hours, it would be transformed into a crime scene. Detective Miller's technical team would arrive at 8 a.m. to install their equipment, and by evening, every word Philip spoke would be recorded for evidence. I had one night to mentally prepare for the performance of my life. Lillian and Philip were out for the evening, giving me precious hours of solitude to process what lay ahead. I sat in my study, surrounded by the evidence that had brought me to this point, and tried to imagine tomorrow's conversation. Philip would present his forged documents with practiced confidence. I would need to react naturally, shocked, confused, gradually defeated. The performance had to be convincing enough that he'd reveal his criminal methods on camera. Morning came too quickly. At 8 a.m., sharp, 3 unmarked vans pulled into my driveway. Detective Miller emerged from the first vehicle, followed by technical specialists carrying equipment cases. Mr. Weaver will have everything installed within 4 hours, she announced, directing her team toward my house. After that we rehearse. I watched in fascination as the specialists worked with surgical precision. Micro cameras appeared throughout my living room and kitchen, each device smaller than a quarter and completely invisible once positioned. Audio equipment followed. Directional microphones that could capture whispered conversations from across the room. These cameras record in ultra-high definition, the lead technician explained, adjusting a lens behind a picture frame. The audio system filters background noise automatically. Unless Philip specifically looks for surveillance equipment, he won't notice anything. Detective Miller handed me an earpiece no bigger than a hearing aid. Direct communication with our monitoring station. We'll be able to guide you if necessary. Where will you be positioned? Mobile command unit across the street. Officers in neighboring houses. Backup team 2 blocks away. She showed me a tablet displaying multiple camera angles from my own living room. Response time will be under 30 seconds if you use the panic signal. By noon, the installation was complete. My familiar home had become a sophisticated recording studio. Every surface concealing equipment worth thousands of dollars. Now we rehearse, Detective Miller announced. For 2 hours we practiced likely scenarios. A detective played Philip while I rehearsed natural responses to his manipulation tactics. Remember, your safety is our top priority, Detective Miller emphasized. Don't try to trap him. Let him reveal his criminality organically. Just be yourself. Be suspicious. Ask the questions any reasonable person would ask. So Preston, we need to discuss the house transfer paperwork, the detective said, role-playing Philip's likely approach. I'm not interested in transferring anything, I replied. Perfect. Keep your responses natural and firm. The more he has to explain, the more evidence we'll gather. At 3 o'clock, Detective Miller tested all communication systems one final time. The earpiece crackled to life. Testing, Mr. Weaver. Can you hear me clearly? Crystal clear. Excellent. Officers are moving into position now. I watched through my kitchen window as neighbors I'd known for years welcomed visiting relatives into their homes. Cecil Brown gave me a subtle nod from his front yard, knowing his house now contained 2 armed officers. Technical check complete, Detective Miller reported. All cameras recording, audio levels optimal, communication systems active. The house looked exactly the same, but I knew that sophisticated equipment worth more than my car was now documenting every movement, every conversation, every breath. At 5 o'clock, Philip's car pulled into the driveway. Showtime, Mr. Weaver. Detective Miller's voice whispered through my earpiece. Remember, we're right here with you. I touched the panic button in my pocket and watched through the front window as Philip approached my door, carrying a manila envelope that undoubtedly contained forged documents with my signature. He knocked with cheerful confidence, completely unaware that his next conversation would be his last as a free man. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock, and I felt the tiny vibration from the communication device in my pocket. Detective Miller signaled that all recording equipment was active. Through the window, I watched Philip climb my front steps with another man carrying a leather briefcase, both wearing confident smiles that I now recognized as predatory. This was it, the moment 3 weeks of investigation had been building toward. I opened the door with practiced calm. Philip, and you brought a friend. Preston. Philip's enthusiasm seemed genuine, which made his deception even more chilling. This is Richard Fox, licensed notary public. We have wonderful news about your housing situation. Richard Fox looked exactly like a corrupt official, middle-aged, overly formal, carrying himself with false authority. His handshake felt like touching a snake. Mr. Weaver. Such a pleasure, Richard said, his voice dripping with manufactured sincerity. Philip has told me so much about your unique circumstances. They settled into my living room with theatrical confidence. Philip spread documents across my coffee table like he owned the place. The hidden cameras recorded every gesture, every smirk, every calculated movement. Preston, I have incredible news, Philip announced, his voice carrying the same tone he'd used when proposing to Lillian. We've just completed the sale of this house. You're moving to a lovely senior facility. It's all arranged. I examined the papers with engineering precision, noting the professional quality of the forgeries. That's interesting, Philip. Who exactly did you sell my house to? A wonderful young family. They're paying well above market value. Philip's smile never wavered. Richard here has all the legal documentation. Richard opened his briefcase with a flourish, revealing official-looking stamps, seals, and notarization equipment. Mr. Weaver, these documents show the completed sale of your property. Everything is legally binding and properly notarized. I don't recall agreeing to sell my house, Mr. Fox. Sometimes elderly individuals forget these important arrangements, Richard replied with practiced condescension. The paperwork clearly shows your signature and consent. Perfect. They were establishing the entire fraud scheme on camera, using the exact language Detective Miller had predicted. While this is certainly unexpected, I said, maintaining my role as confused elderly victim, perhaps we should drive to the police station first, just to make sure everything is proper. Philip's confident expression flickered for just a moment. The police station? Why would we need to go there? They're very interested in the information I sent them about your previous house sales. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Philip's face went pale while Richard shifted nervously in his chair. What? What do you mean by previous sales? Philip's voice had lost its confident tone. I mean your activities in Phoenix, Denver, and 3 other cities, Philip. The police have been looking for you for quite some time. Philip stood abruptly, the forged documents scattering. You're talking nonsense. Richard, tell him these documents are completely legal. Philip, what is he talking about? Richard's professional mask was cracking. You said this was a clean operation. I mean that Detective Sarah Miller has 47 recordings of you discussing your criminal plans, Philip. I remained seated, watching their panic build, including your conversation with Richard about forged notary seals. Richard went white. Philip, you said his house was clean. You never mentioned police investigations. Shut up, Richard. Philip grabbed the documents, heading for the door. This old man is confused. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But the sound of car doors slamming outside made him freeze mid-step. Through the window, unmarked police vehicles surrounded my house. Officers positioning themselves at every exit. Philip turned back to me, his predatory confidence replaced by desperate fear. What have you done? I pressed the panic button in my pocket and said calmly. I protected my home from thieves, Philip. Something you should have considered before you decided to target the wrong engineer. The front door burst open, and Detective Miller stepped through with 3 uniformed officers, their badges gleaming under my living room lights. Philip stood frozen in the center of my living room, still clutching the forged documents that would now serve as evidence of his crimes. Philip Green, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, elder abuse, conspiracy, and interstate criminal enterprise, Detective Miller announced, her voice carrying the authority of 15 years in law enforcement. This is ridiculous. Philip's confidence cracked completely. Preston, tell them this is a family misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Philip, was thinking you could steal my house. I remained seated, watching justice unfold with engineering precision. Richard Fox had already raised his hands in surrender, his briefcase open to reveal the tools of their criminal trade. Officers, I want to cooperate fully, he said, his voice shaking. I didn't know about his previous crimes. Mr. Fox, you're also under arrest, Detective Miller replied. Your cooperation will be noted in your file. Richard, don't say anything. Philip shouted as officers moved to secure him. They can't prove anything. Oh, but we can prove everything. The surveillance cameras had captured every word, every gesture, every incriminating admission. As Philip raised his hands for handcuffs, I felt the satisfaction of a complex engineering project reaching successful completion. Sir, we need you to hand over those documents, one officer commanded. Philip's last act of defiance was attempting to tear up the forged papers. 2 officers stopped him immediately, preserving evidence that would send him to federal prison. These papers are private family business, he protested. They're evidence in multiple felony cases across 3 states, Detective Miller corrected, carefully collecting each document for the evidence chain. Through my front window, I watched neighbors gathering on the sidewalk. Cecil Brown stood in his yard with arms crossed, nodding approval. The quiet suburban street had become a crime scene, and the entire community was witnessing Philip's downfall. Mr. Weaver, for the record, Detective Miller said, did these men attempt to fraudulently claim ownership of your house using forged documents? Yes, Detective. Using fake signatures, corrupt notary seals, and systematic intimidation tactics. He's lying. Philip's desperation was complete now. This was a legitimate family arrangement. I was helping an elderly man who can't manage his own affairs. The irony was perfect. Philip's final defense was exactly the condescending attitude that had motivated me to fight back so methodically. Your honor will determine the legitimacy, Detective Miller replied, leading Philip toward the door in handcuffs. Richard's cooperation began immediately. Officers, I have information about other operations. Other targets Philip was researching. I want to help prevent more crimes. Smart choice, Mr. Fox, Detective Miller said. Full cooperation might reduce your sentence from 15 years to 5. As the police cars loaded their prisoners, media vans began arriving. Word had spread quickly through the neighborhood that a major fraud operation had been exposed by an elderly resident's detective work. Mr. Weaver, a reporter called from behind police tape. How did you discover this criminal scheme? 40 years of engineering taught me to analyze problems systematically, I replied. When something doesn't make sense, you investigate until it does. Detective Miller returned as the crowd dispersed. Outstanding work, Mr. Weaver. This arrest closes cases in 5 states. You've probably saved dozens of families from similar fraud. What happens next? Trial in about 8 weeks. With your evidence and today's recordings, conviction is virtually certain. She handed me her card. The district attorney will want to discuss your testimony. But this case is as solid as they come. I looked at my house, finally secure again, no longer under threat from criminal predators. The surveillance equipment would be removed tomorrow, returning my home to normal. But I would never be the same person who'd been surprised by Philip's demand 3 weeks ago. Detective Miller, I said. Thank you for believing an old man's suspicions were worth investigating. Mr. Weaver, she replied with genuine respect. You didn't just help yourself. You stopped a career criminal who was destroying families across the country. That's something to be proud of. As the last police car disappeared down my quiet street, I realized that while this battle was won, the war for justice was just beginning. Philip's trial would be the final chapter in a story that started with his arrogant demand for my house. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, I would sleep peacefully in my own bed, in my own house, protected by my own intelligence and determination. 8 weeks had passed since Philip's arrest, and I walked up the granite steps of the Cook County Courthouse, carrying the same briefcase that had helped convict him. The spring morning was crisp, May sunshine warming my face as I prepared for the final confrontation. Detective Miller waited by the courthouse entrance, and she smiled as she saw me approaching. Ready for the final chapter, Mr. Weaver? She asked. More than ready, I replied, feeling the weight of justice in my briefcase. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with activity. Philip sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his confident swagger replaced by the hollow stare of a man facing decades in prison. Richard Fox had already pleaded guilty in exchange for testimony against his former partner. But the most important sight was Lillian, sitting in the front row behind the prosecution table. She'd filed for divorce within a week of Philip's arrest, reclaiming her maiden name and her dignity. When our eyes met, she smiled with the same warmth I remembered from her childhood. Judge Jonathan Clark called the court to order. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here today to determine the guilt or innocence of Philip Green on charges of interstate fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and criminal conspiracy. The prosecutor's opening statement laid out Philip's criminal empire systematically. 12 victims across 5 states, over $2 million stolen in property, a pattern of targeting elderly homeowners through marriage fraud spanning 3 years. The evidence will show, the prosecutor concluded, that Philip Green is not an opportunistic criminal, but a systematic predator who destroyed families for personal profit. Philip's defense attorney attempted damage control. Ladies and gentlemen, my client made poor choices, but he's not the mastermind the prosecution claims. He was manipulated by others into these unfortunate situations. I almost laughed. Even facing life in prison, Philip couldn't accept responsibility for his own actions. The prosecution's case unfolded with mathematical precision. Victim after victim testified about Philip's identical methods: quick courtship, immediate housing concerns, forged documents, corrupt notarization, and family destruction. Eleanor Martinez from Phoenix spoke through tears about losing her home of 40 years. Robert Chun from Denver described the stress-induced heart attack that followed his eviction. Each story was identical, each family devastated by the same systematic predator. Then came the audio recordings from Philip's own surveillance camera. The courtroom fell silent as his voice filled the room. Asterisk, the old man is completely trusting. By the end of the month, the house will be ours. Asterisk, Philip's face crumpled as he heard his own words condemning him. There was no defense against his own recorded confession. Mr. Weaver, the prosecutor called, please take the stand. I walked to the witness box with steady steps, feeling the weight of not just my own case, but all the families Philip had destroyed. Mr. Weaver, please describe the events of March 25th. The defendant arrived at my house with forged documents claiming I had sold my property, I said clearly. He demanded immediate eviction and threatened nursing home placement if I didn't comply. How did you respond? I suggested we visit the police station where I had already reported his criminal activities based on 3 weeks of investigation. Philip's attorney attempted cross-examination. Mr. Weaver, isn't it possible this was simply a family misunderstanding? Counselor, I replied with engineering precision. Systematic criminals who target elderly victims across multiple states don't create misunderstandings. They create federal cases. The courtroom erupted in quiet laughter. Even the judge smiled. After 2 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Judge Clark's sentencing was swift and merciless. Mr. Green, you've systematically targeted vulnerable elderly citizens for financial exploitation. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison with full restitution to all victims. Philip's legs gave out as the bailiff approached with handcuffs. The confident predator who demanded my house 2 months ago was now a broken man facing more than a decade behind bars. Richard Fox received 5 years with possibility of parole. His cooperation noted but not excused. Outside the courthouse, Lillian hugged me tightly. Dad, I'm so proud of how you protected not just yourself, but all those other families. Sweetheart, you loved someone who deceived professionals for years. That shows your good heart, not poor judgment. How can you forgive me for bringing him into our lives? Because you're my daughter, and you deserve someone who values the wonderful person you are. Detective Miller joined us on the courthouse steps. Mr. Weaver, this case will be taught in police academies. You've shown that age brings wisdom, not vulnerability. As Lillian and I drove home together, she reached over and squeezed my hand. Dad, what's next for you? I thought about speaking engagements for elder fraud prevention, about helping other victims find their voice, about using my engineering mind to solve problems beyond just my own. Whatever comes next, I said, I know I can handle it. At 68, I had learned that protecting family requires not just love, but strategic thinking, careful preparation, and unwavering determination. Sometimes that combination is exactly what justice needs most. My house was safe, my daughter was healing, and Philip Green would spend the next dozen years remembering the old man who refused to be his victim.